All right, listen, it is normal for summer blockbusters to have a big movie rollout. I get it. But I'll tell you right now, whatever is happening with the Barbie movie, it's not normal. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. Today on the show, how the Barbie movie somehow became the Barbie summer. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Listen, the movie is not out for a couple of weeks, but we are already living in a Barbie world. You step into a mall, stuff is bright pink. Your social media feeds are full of this.
This is Barbie Talk.
And action.
Oh, yeah.
I'm in no hurry. I can never slow down.
That's the entirety of my TikTok, is just that sound over and over again. There's also the Barbie selfie generator, and then also you're hearing songs from the soundtrack like this one.
I'm a Barbie girl, pink Barbie dream.
Nicki Minaj, Ice Spice, that song is everywhere. It's my early contender for Song of the Summer. Also, like every serious publication has this like really in-depth Barbie analysis. And you know what we're doing today? We're going to get into it because to me, somehow we found ourselves in a Barbie hurricane, and I want to talk about it. It is probably the most visible lead up to any movie ever. The Barbie movie is a proof that we are in the middle of this, what I would call a profound shift, just in terms of the way that movies get made. So I gathered a bunch of people around the Commotion table to talk about this, but the fact that we are living in a Barbie world. We got Niko Stratis in Toronto, Gabrielle Drolet in Montreal, and in New York, Jason P. Frank. Gabby, Niko, Jason, welcome to the group chat. How's it going, everybody?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Doing great.
I'm so excited to get into this. Niko, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to do like personal relationships with the Barbie brand in general. Like just the idea of Barbie. Maybe Niko, I'll start with you. How did Barbie start showing up in your own childhood?
My sister had a Barbie, so I'm trans, and when I was younger, and I'm older, I'm 40, I just turned 41, and in the 90s especially, these toys, there was a real gender tied to a lot of these toys, and my sister had a Barbie, and I coveted them a lot when I was younger, but I was never allowed to because they weren't the toys that people played with. So, I was pushed sort of down the Lego and Playmobil rabbit hole. But I always really sort of coveted this Barbie.
Yeah.
And I would sort of witness this world that my sister was creating. And I was like, I want that for myself, and it was just it was this thing that I coveted my whole life. And now it's interesting to see it come back around when I'm 41 and be this very culturally relevant conversation.
I'm gonna ask you at some point in this conversation if you've now purchased your first Barbie or not. Have you?
Okay.
But you hold on to that thought for a moment. Jason, what about you? When do you remember becoming fascinated with Barbies?
Well, I wasn't really a toy kid. I was more of a book kid. I just
one of those.
Wasn't super. Yeah,
that's a flex, by the way. Where the way that you say it, I was reading. Sorry, you guys, you were playing.
Not intended to be a flex. I promise you, it did not make me more friends.
Okay, all right.
But I was also in line with being a book kid. I was a fun fact kid. I loved a fun fact, and I remember. I was reading maybe in first or second grade. I read this fact in a book even that said that if a girl owns one Barbie, she's likely to own 7. Statistically, that's true. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And I remember going into school the next day and conducting anthropological research or more, qualitative research, interviewing my friends.
You were a scientist.
And really, and really realizing the impact of Barbie in that way. There were girls who were just not allowed to have Barbies because of various reasons. Mostly their parents were into feminism, if you've heard of it. And then there was another side who had, 8 to 16, right? And that I was fascinated by that dichotomy.
I'm making all these furious notes of things I want to come back to. Exactly this point of Barbie versus feminism. Totally a thing I wanted to return to. But Gabby, I'm going to go to you here. You are decked out in pink today for people who can't see you. That's what I'm looking at. But also, that one would think, hey, you've been ride or die for Barbie your whole life. But when did you first actually encounter Barbie?
Yeah, I don't know if you can see, this is a Barbie hat also. I really went all out.
Incredible.
Yeah, but no, I was not a Barbie kid. Growing up, I remember my mom would have to sit me down before birthday parties or Christmas with extended family, people who didn't know me well, and be like, if you get a Barbie, you have to say thank you. You can't be a brat about it. Because I was so not into Barbie. I had an older brother, and I was like, I want Pokemon cards. I want like whatever my brother had. That was my thing.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Montreal a few years ago, and Montreal, for those who don't know, has the largest permanent exposition of Barbie in the world.
Sure didn't
and I
know
found
that.
it one day.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great fact. It's connected to the metro station, and I was just trying to leave, and I found myself in this space, and I was like, why are there thousands of Barbies? This is like it's the weirdest place in the world.
What does that
The
look like?
ceilings are-
What does a Barbie
Okay.
exhibit
Sure.
look like? Yeah.
So picture this. You have like an exposed cement floor. Okay.
Ready.
The walls are white. The ceiling is black. It's a
That's
place
not-
of
that's
extremes.
not very Barbie-like
the
at all.
Barbie Expo.
Yeah.
No, but then the walls are lined with like over 1,000 Barbies, and they're like lit with these really intense LED lights. And you have Barbies dating back to the 50s, but it's really poorly labeled. So there's no dates on any of the Barbies.
Yeah.
And I became obsessed immediately. I was seeing all these Barbies that I missed out on as a kid. There's like the Twilight Barbies, but then also, really old ones. And I emailed the Barbie Expo and I was like, do you have information on all the Barbies? And they said no. And I was like, I'm a historian now. This is my new life's mission. For the past year and a half, I've been a historian for the Barbie Expo. I don't think that they like that about me, but I became very into Barbie a little later in life. Yeah.
But the thing that I think all your stories kind of prove, though, is that this is the moment we're arriving at now. So there was this recent piece in the New Yorker where Alex Barash interviewed the head of Mattel Films. His name is Robbie Brenner. And I'm going to quote him. He said, "In the world we're living in, IP, intellectual property, is king. Pre-awareness is everything." And pre-awareness is this like sort of kind of gross industry term that suggests that by the time you show up to see the movie, you're kind of already familiar with something that has to do with that world. Think of like Transformers, those were toys. The Marvel movies, those were comic books for people who, I guess, didn't know that somehow. But there's some kind of already pre-existing base to jump off of. Jason, can you unpack that for me, the idea of how important pre-existing intellectual property is?
I think it's huge because we're living in a time when movie theaters are dying, right? Like they are constantly dying. No one's going to them. And so the solution that a lot of studios have looked to is that we need to make event films, right? Like we need to make it so that going to the theater is an event for people, because that will actually get them out of the house and going to the theater as opposed to just waiting for the movie to show up on streaming. Yeah. And how do you make it an event? You have a pre-existing relationship to the thing that already is in theaters. It's much harder to create an event. It's much harder to create something that someone is going to move out of their house for if they don't have a pre-existing relationship. And so this kind of idea of IP is really driving the movie industry right now, because it's the only thing that they've looked to that will get people into movie theaters and spending movie theater level money rather than waiting for it to come up on streaming where you can rent it for $4 or not pay for tickets generally. And I think that that's really what's important here.
Now, I was going to say, Niko, I remember when the first stills of the Barbie movie came out. I think they happened like last June of 2022, a year in which the movie's not even coming out. And that we sort of found ourselves at the start of this marketing campaign that was sort of, you had these little trickles of information about, hey, here's what's happening with the Barbie movie. Hey, here's another still. Look at this crazy outfit that Margot Robbie's wearing. And there's something about the fact that because I already know what Barbie is, I have an interest in this marketing campaign. I have like a sort of a curiosity in this marketing campaign, because lots of movies release stills of like what's happening on set, before. You don't really end up caring about them, but you do in this particular case. How do you feel about this idea that IP is king? Because you've talked about how this idea that Barbie's kind of winking at us. And actually, Niko, I want to play a clip that you mentioned, and it's not from Barbie. It's Sylvester Stallone and Sandra Bullock in Demolition Man. Let's hear that clip right now.
He says I saved his life, which I'm not even sure I did, and my reward is dinner and dancing at Taco Bell. I mean, hey, I like Mexican food, but come on.
Your tone is quasi-facetious, but you do not realize that Taco Bell was the only restaurant to survive the franchise wars.
So?
So? Now all restaurants are Taco Bell.
No way.
Niko, you are the reason that clip was being played today, by the way. But you said this whole conversation reminds you of Demolition Man and that scene. Why?
It kind of does. It's amazing how prescient Demolition Man, a movie starring Sylvester Stallone and Wesley Snipes, was.
Great movie,
you know,
but not
this.
Yes, continue.
But this idea that like eventually capitalism was going to lead us down this road where there was going to be one franchise that would dominate everything, and we are sort of in this thing right now. And what the Barbie movie has done something incredibly smart, which is when they first announced it, you ride this wave of like, well, what are you going to do with a Barbie movie? And you trickle out these stills, right? Like we saw the still of the two of them on a beach wearing this fluorescent clothing and rollerblading with no context. And every time it becomes a cycle of memes because you're relying on people wanting to create content for a little bit of social media fame, right?
Yeah.
So you're riding these constant waves where every time you can change the narrative a little bit. You can have those first stills. You can release a trailer that plays at 2001: A Space Odyssey, a movie which a lot of people haven't even seen.
That's exactly right. It's a meme of a meme, right? Yeah.
It's a meme of a meme. It's that same thing of pre-awareness, right? If you've never seen 2001, you probably might still get that reference. And then so you ride these rolling hills of content and discourse. So you can sort of keep this conversation alive, and you can really build this to this crescendo of this moment of like, the first time we saw a trailer that had actual story in it. You've been waiting all this time. You've been building to this moment. You've been waiting for the one franchise to come. Yes. You've been waiting for Taco Bell to come and sell you everything. By the way, if Taco Bell is the only restaurant that remains at the end of all this, I'm not going to complain necessarily.
Gabrielle, when you look at all this marketing, this mountain of marketing that's kind of been building up for the last year or so, would you say it's working for you?
Absolutely. I mean, again, I bought this Gap Barbie hat collaboration, right? I think
yes,
it is interesting because when the Barbie movie first started being marketed, I was right in the beginning of my being obsessed with Barbie phase. But a lot of people who are really into this movie and really excited to see it are not people who really care about the Barbie Expo, right? Most aren't. I think a lot of people have, they never really owned Barbies. They're not super into Barbie. But there's something really nostalgic and fun about it. Mm-hmm. And I do think it's also, like you said, the movie feels like it's winking at us, kind of. It's like, it's a joke that we're in on. It's silly. It's fun. It's bright. And I think that is something we're kind of missing from a lot of movie marketing or movies generally, is just fun. Like this movie, the stakes feel low. It's just silly. It's bright. It's actors we love. And every single time people start to lose interest, oh, they built a Malibu Barbie house. Oh, Ryan Gosling said something about Kenergy, right? Yes. It's like they're really finding the right things to hook even people who don't care about the brand necessarily.
And I think that that's super intentional. I mean, the tagline in the trailer is, if you love Barbie, this movie is for you. If you don't like Barbie, this movie is for you.
Mm-hmm. Right? They know.
That's played out on the screen. And I feel like the first thing, when we talk about that first little drip of content that we got, to me, it wasn't even when we got the photos on the beach. I think it was when Greta Gerwig was announced as the director. That was when everyone started going, what is going on my feed? Because there's something, we're used to seeing actors kind of be like, oh, well, I guess I'll go do this toy movie over here. Yeah. If Margot Robbie was starring in it without Greta Gerwig, I think it would just be like, oh, okay, this is happening. But suddenly there's Greta Gerwig, who's known for movies like Little Women and Frances Ha and Lady Bird, which are prestige pictures. Yeah. And suddenly you're getting a combination, a high-low situation of prestige and artistry combined with the low culture of Barbie. And I feel like that was the first thing that really made people sit up and go oh, this could be interesting, even if Barbie wasn't something that they necessarily had fond memories of.
Niko, I'm interested in this particular thread because at that point, when Greta was announced, at this point she's coming off Oscar nominations for Little Women, for Lady Bird. As Jason mentioned, she has this sort of pre-established indie credibility and indie sort of sensibility to be like, oh my God, Greta Gerwig, she can really craft a story around something that has to do with the Barbie movie. But how do you feel about the idea that if you make a compelling film that is an independent film or a relatively cheap film, and it's a big cultural hit, and we go, wow, you're an auteur, you are an established filmmaker, and you can really make movies, your reward in this cultural moment is a massive franchise. Like, it used to be the case that if you made, Donnie Darko, they'd be like, okay, go make that, but more expensive. And then they would give you $40 million to make your next kind of weird little dark idea and then to sort of take a risk on you. But now it seems like if you make a successful movie for a cheap amount of money, they go, okay, now you get to take $200 million and you get to direct a Marvel movie, or in this particular case, you get to direct a Mattel movie. How do you feel about rewarding our auteurs with a franchise film?
I mean, in certain instances, like if this was happening in fits and starts, it would be one thing. Like if it was like Greta Gerwig Barbie movie, and then we didn't immediately get the news Greta Gerwig Narnia movie, now we're taking Greta Gerwig off the table, right?
Which, let's go. I'm ready for that Narnia movie, but continue. Yes.
I mean, like the market response from Greta Gerwig Barbie movie and Greta Gerwig Narnia movie has been probably very different. Yes. But we saw this a lot, like the MCU-ification of the movie industry has been a thing that sort of happened slowly over time. And we saw this, Robert Downey Jr. was an actor that everybody had written off because he had, he struggled with addiction and he had all these problems, and then he made Iron Man and redeemed himself. Taika Waititi was like a beloved indie filmmaker who made these beautiful films, and then he made a Thor movie. And I thought, great, he'll make his money, he'll get his blank check, and he'll go off and go back to auteur stuff. Yeah. But instead, he made another Thor movie, and it was not good. So there is this concern of like, we're seeing this conversation now where they're saying, well, Barbie is the opening salvo, and now, Daniel Kaluuya is going to make a Barney movie that's just Death for Smoochie, but made 20 years later, and we're going to get all this stuff. And it's like, do we want this from all these people? Do we want all our auteurs and all these interesting filmmakers? Like, even if they're doing these sort of winks and nods in their filmmaking and their storytelling, is this what we always want? Do we want them to be taking existing IP, or do we want them to be given the resources and the support they need to make compelling movies?
Gabrielle, Niko just mentioned the Barney movie. That is one of allegedly 45, that's what the New Yorker piece said, 45 movies currently in development from Mattel Studios. Barbie, you think this is big. This is like the beginning, and the idea of like, again, getting someone like Daniel Kaluuya, who just had a pretty big award season, like a 1.5, I think it was like a year and a half ago. The Barney movie that he's creating and producing, by the way, is being written by Lee Sung-jin, who's a creator of Beef. There's something to be said. Listen, Niko and I are from a generation where we would say, are these people selling out? Like, there's something about exchanging all of the credibility you built and taking it to the bank and saying, you know what, I'm ready to just make a bunch of money. And it feels like it's selling out. And that used to be some kind of insult or accusation. Does that still carry the same weight?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think to a certain extent, yes, because like we just said, the Narnia movie got announced a few days ago, and immediately people who were very pro Barbie movie started to turn on Greta Gerwig, where it's like, oh, is this what this is now? Is this who she is? Yeah. And even with Phoebe Waller-Bridge, I know recently she's been involved in all these big franchises as well. And
after Fleabag, she went on to do like the new Indiana Jones, for example. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Star Wars and everything. And in the beginning, it's like, okay, cool, good for her. And now it's like, okay, like we get it, go back. And I think, people have maybe some lenience or some tolerance for these directors going into big IP stuff for a movie or for a bit. But then, like Niko said, you keep being like, okay, like when are you returning to make the indie stuff that we loved or that felt more original and more you? Yeah. And I don't know. I mean, personally, I don't feel very strongly about the selling out thing. It always does suck when it feels like you're, quote unquote, losing a director. But the thing about indie artists is that they're going to keep coming up, right? There's going to be more artists who have really great ideas and not very much money and are going to make incredible work. And then maybe that work does well and they become a Mattel director and that's the life cycle now. I don't know. But it is... Yeah, it's really interesting to see people immediately lose patience with the director once they, quote unquote, sell out. I think that culture still exists for sure.
I think there's something about the notion of selling out, Jason, that is really sort of maybe a bit more overhyped, particularly with the Barbie movie. Like, there's so much focus on it because nostalgia is such a big factor of this. We should talk about the fact that the color, like the hot pink Barbie color, is like a huge part of the marketing campaign right now. It is basically everywhere. I actually want you guys to listen to Greta Gerwig. She's talking with Architectural Digest, talking about all the meetings they had in order to arrive at the right, correct pink.
We like sat with all these different kinds of pinks and we were like, what is the pink and how do the pinks interact? Because I didn't want it to be so classy that it didn't, like when I was a little girl, I liked the pinkest, brightest things.
Jason, how much is nostalgia playing into this idea of us either considering this a sellout thing or actually just considering this to be a powerful marketing campaign?
I think nostalgia is big in this. I mean, I know a lot of people are very excited about it because they remember the Barbie animated movies, right? Like that's huge. I think the people who have positive memories of Barbie as a doll are loving this. And that's not a minor amount of people. You know, we talk about how Barbie is maybe like anti-feminist. We talk about Barbie this, Barbie that. But a lot of people have positive memories of Barbie growing up. Yeah. And I think that that's big. I would say, though, that I do think people want something new. Like, I don't think people are looking for, like, the nostalgia isn't so large that they want something they've already seen regurgitated, right? Like, this isn't something that where we want to see an animated Barbie movie brought to life. It's not like a Disney, like one of those Disney live action things, which are terrible. There is a goal for it to be something new.
Yeah, and I think like that is why you get Greta Gerwig involved, right? Like at least again, we were having this in our entire conversation. No one has seen the movie, so we were talking sort of about the build up to the thing. But that is why you get someone like Greta involved. Listen, we can't wrap this entire conversation without talking about the Barbie soundtrack because this song is everywhere right now.
And I'm bad like the Barbie. I'm a doll, but I still wanna party. Pink felt like I'm ready to bend. I'm a 10, so I pull in a can. Like Jazzy, Stacy.
Let's go! This track, Nicki Minaj, Ice Spice, Barbie World. It relies itself on pre-existing IP because it is sampling the Aqua song. Niko, do you think that this is just gonna be seeping into all the music that gets made?
I mean, I think so. You know, like we talk about this, like we keep having this conversation about the like pre-existing IP. And when people were talking about the movie, this was the first question for a lot of people, especially people in our age demographic, was, are they going to use the Aqua song? Because we remember it as being the one song that referenced Barbie from the 1990s or whatever, you know? Yeah. And I always sort of had this idea before I had heard anything with the soundtrack of like, well, obviously they're going to do this thing where they take a pre-existing idea and they're going to put it into the modern era in a context that makes sense. And this, like, it works so perfectly in the song. Like, I heard the Aqua song enough. I never need to hear that song ever again in my entire life. I really love hearing it here. And I do think like this is going to be the way it goes. It goes with these sorts of movies, right? So there's going to be these winks and nods. And I hope it brings us back into a proper soundtrack culture where movies have soundtracks that we love and talk about that mean something, that are like saying something about the film and the time that it's made.
Niko's like, we used to be a proper country.
We used to be a proper country. God damn it.
Jason, what about you? What stands out for you in the soundtrack?
I mean, I love the Charlie song. I think it's
Charlie
great.
XCX
I think
song,
it's Charlie XCX. Yes. Sorry, not to every. She's not that famous. Not to everyone.
The
she's
medium
not
famous.
Charlie, yeah, she's medium famous. So yes, the Charlie XCX song I think is really great. I like that they've brought in someone who has. I mean, Charlie's always been interested in the plastic in the world, like artistically. That's something that comes up a lot for her. She's interested in phoniness. She's interested in brattiness. She's interested in femininity. And I think even though she's pop, she does that she's trying to take it a little more high concept. And I think that bringing her in, even if it's not, you know, her most high concept song, is, I think, a wise nod to something that mirrors the high-low version of the film overall, right? Like, this is kind of like Charlie doing a Barbie soundtrack song is not that far from Greta doing a Barbie movie.
I'm 100% agreed with you. That's what I like about Charlie, and she's sort of a natural fit to this. To me, the natural fit is also Dua Lipa, who's also in the movie. But I'm just excited to get the full soundtrack. But in the meantime, I got to let you guys go. Thank you so much for the spirited conversation about Barbie. Niko, Jason, Gabby, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for having us.
Of course, everybody. Thank you so much. Niko Stratis is a writer at Autostraddle. Gabrielle Drolet is a freelance writer based in Montreal. Jason P. Frank is a writer for Vulture. He's in New York City. Barbie is July 21st. And that is it. That is it for our show today. Tomorrow, by the way, I hope that you're going to be here because we're having a very full-length Taylor Swift conversation. Speak Now is my album. It is coming out tomorrow. Let's go. That's it for Commotion. I'm going to be here if you're going to be here. Hope to see you then.
Watch me.